All right, good afternoon, class. This is Dr. Jace. I am under the weather, so I am actually going to go ahead and do I'm going to share some information now that I was actually going to share later on in the course, and that's going to be information about the framework. And the reason I'm doing that is because this is going to be a fairly quick one compared to the others, and I am on such low energy right now that, um, yeah, in order for me to do what I had originally planned, which was um, open educational resources, OERs, that takes a lot of prep and a lot of explaining, and it is something that's important in academic libraries, but it's going to require me to have more energy and more uh, vocal resilience, I should say. And I can't be in a position where I'm just coughing the entire time. So, I don't know how you folks who grew up in the Midwest do this. I am from the South. We do not go from -5 to 60 something degrees in a few days. That just doesn't happen. And my body does not adjust well to this. So anyway, we're going to talk about the framework. And you will see in the syllabus that the framework is actually part part of one of your either assignments or discussions later on in the course. Um, and it replaces the old ACRL standards. Um, but the framework, if you are trying to land a job in an academic library, especially in instruction, then the framework is something that you're going to need to know about. And that's why there is either an assignment or a discussion board post related to it. I believe it actually is an assignment. So let me go to the page that explains what the framework is, and then I am going to show you a framework resource that if you have the time, this is all optional, but if you have the time, then it's something you might be interested in. Let me make myself smaller. Okay. ACRL framework. Okay. So, the ACRL framework was adopted, in 2016, so it's still fairly new. The framework was not in use when I was in library school from 2006 to 2008. Okay? Um, and the framework replaces the old standards. Okay, and so I'm pretty much introducing you all to the framework right now. My coverage isn't going to be too in-depth, and the reason for that is you all can read. So I am going to refer you to a link where you can read about them. www.ala.org/ACRL/standards/information literacy framework, or IL framework. And this is the framework for information literacy in higher education. Now, there are 6 frames. I think you all might have seen in an earlier video where I was not sure if it was 6 or 7 frames, but there are 6 frames. So the frames are: authority is constructed and contextual, information creation as a process, information has value, research as inquiry, scholarship as conversation, and searching as strategic exploration. All right. So you got an intro there, and the intro is nice, and it introduces you to the subject. Yeah. Okay. So there are frames, and they are presented alphabetically and do not suggest a particular sequence in which they must be learned. So, authority is constructed and contextual. Information resources reflect their creators' expertise and credibility and are evaluated based on the information need and the context in which the information will be used. Authority is constructed in that various communities may recognize different types of authority. It is contextual in that the information need may help to determine the level of authority required. Okay, so experts understand, I'm just going to read through this unbolded text as well. Experts understand that authority is a type of influence recognized or asserted within a community. Experts view authority with an attitude of informed skepticism and an openness to new perspectives, additional voices, and changes in schools of thought. Experts understand the need to determine the validity of information created by different authorities and to acknowledge biases that privilege some sources of authority over others, especially in terms of worldviews, gender, sexual orientation, and cultural orientations. An understanding of this concept enables Novus learners to critically examine all evidence, be it a short blog post or a peer-reviewed conference proceeding, and to ask relevant questions about origins, context, and suitability for the current information need. So this is what I would call kind of a user-centered approach. Basically, what you are being told here is that the person who has the information need and who is reviewing the source, they have they can establish their own context for the relevance and pertinence of the information that they are encountering. And this is supposedly in order to get novice learners to sort of come to respect the expertise of authority in information that is presented across platforms. So like it says here, it can be either peer-reviewed information or it can be a short blog post. And that's something that I think is I think this is really only the beginning. I don't think that this is going to suffice long term because our students, frankly, they just aren't taught critical thinking skills in K-12. So when they come to college, a lot of times they are lacking in being able to determine authority. And so, yeah, I'm not really sold on this approach entirely. Because I do feel, and it says here, novice learners may need to rely on basic indicators of authority, such as type of publication or author credentials, where experts recognize schools of thought or discipline specific paradigms. My issue with that is that there really is there's so many things as far as novice learners are concerned. There are so many things that can pass themselves off as good information, and they are not particularly good information. Even if the authority is there, if it's somebody working for a legit news outlet right now, because news, quote unquote news, can be so biased. It's a la carte these days. And because it can be so biased, I think that this approach is actually inviting students to make judgments based on emotions and establish authority based on emotions and not really looking at authority objectively. So two examples that I would look at, I guess, would be HuffPost or Breitbart. I don't think there's a lot of incorrect information in what's posted in the HuffPost or what's posted in Breitbart. But even if there's not a lot of incorrect information, I still think that those outlets are very susceptible to telling one side of the story and presenting information in a way that satisfies the emotions of the information seeker. And we've got to be really careful. I think that information confirmation has to get to a point where emotion does not play a part. So that's just me. The second frame is information creation as a process. Information in any format is produced to convey a message and is shared via a selected delivery method. The iterative processes of researching, creating, revising, and disseminating information vary, and the resulting product reflects these differences. So there's nothing really, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing particularly controversial about this. As it says here in this paragraph, the information creation process could result in a range of information formats and modes of delivery, so experts look beyond format when selecting resources to use. And this is why a lot of times you'll see specific, in assignments in higher education, you will see specific directions where students are required to find at least one example of this source, one example of that source, and so forth and so on. It is because of, I would say that this frame just kind of speaks to that. If you have a casual information need and you're not being graded, then why are you specifically looking for peer-reviewed research if something on WebMD might get you what you need exactly? Or, why would you look for an actual book about the history of Kansas City if you can find a website that gives you a concise Kansas City history? So, it depends on what your information need is, but regardless, information creation is a process, and I think that there are definitely times when certain information needs to be part of this process or that. Some information may need to appear in a newspaper, others in a book, and others in a peer-reviewed journal. So that's where we are with that. Information has value. Information possesses several dimensions of value, including as a commodity, as a means of education, as a means to influence, and as a means of negotiating and understanding the world. Legal and socioeconomic interests influence information production and dissemination. So definitely there are, and I used to be a newspaper reporter, so I can definitely speak to that. There are certain things that you just legally cannot put out there. Libel is actually fairly hard to prove because in most cases, libel, there needs to be either malicious intent or reckless abandonment as far as misrepresenting the facts. If you can't prove that there's malicious intent and you can't prove carelessness, then a lot of times a libel lawsuit will not stand. But information has value. It's a commodity. That's why libraries exist. We kind of crowdsource the payment of valuable information in libraries. So we all pull together our resources so that we can provide information to the public in general. Information has costs associated with its production. So I do think that intellectual property holders, reporters or researchers or whomever is producing information, I definitely think that they should be allowed to profit or at least get paid off what they are doing. And if you've ever been a newspaper reporter, which a lot of people in the libraries apparently have been, I've noticed over the years, then you know that reporters don't get paid squats. I mean, it's terrible. So there's I think that if we are trying to get the best people to produce the best information, I do think that there has to be some sort of payment incentive. Research is inquiry. Okay, so research is iterative and depends upon asking increasingly complex or new questions, whose answers in turn develop additional questions or lines of inquiry in any field. And I think that this is, actually, let me look at this. I think this is kind of going hand in hand with berry picking as a model of information behavior. Let me see. Miss Marsha Bates, I just want to double check on you. Let's see. Berry picking, page 58. Let me pause this for a second. Yeah, so I'm definitely satisfied to say that there's some Marcia Bates, berry picking sort of logic to this particular frame. I'm going to read a quote from Marcia Bates. At each stage, with each different conception of the query, the user may identify useful information and references. In other words, the query is satisfied not by a single final retrieved set, but by a series of selections of individual references and bits of information at each stage of the ever-modifying search. So, you see research is inquiry here, and one thing you're going to see is that you are going to generally ask multiple queries with things that are particularly in depth, that are particularly complicated. Now, there are some times when that's not going to happen. If you are doing a basic search, for instance, if you are being asked for the phone number of the reference department, which that can happen, then you're probably not going to, that is an information need and it's a reference question, but it's not something that is complex enough that it's going to require you to make several inquiries, if that makes sense. Okay. Scholarship as conversation. So communities of scholars, researchers, or professionals engaged in sustained discourse, with new insights and discoveries occurring over time as a result of varied perspectives and interpretations. And I do want to go ahead and read this paragraph here. Research in scholarly and professional fields is a discursive practice in which ideas are formulated, debated, and weighed against one another over extended periods of time. Instead of seeking discrete answers to complex problems, experts understand that a given issue may be characterized by several competing perspectives as part of an ongoing conversation in which information users and creators come together and negotiate meaning. Experts understand that while some topics have established answers through this process, a query may not have a single uncontested answer. Experts are therefore inclined to seek out many perspectives, not merely ones in which they are familiar. And that is going to get you guys out of your comfort zone when you are trying to do that sort of thing. These perspectives might be in their own discipline or profession, or they may be in other fields. And because LIS, Library and Information Science, is such an interdisciplinary field, this is something that we struggle with. I will say that the theory that I used for my dissertation, which was Herzberg's motivation hygiene theory, it served the purposes that I needed it to serve for my dissertation. But at the same time, critiqued is too strong a word, but I was challenged during a speech that I made at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, regarding regarding my use of that theory, because one of the people sitting in the audience was somebody who was familiar with that theory, but was also familiar with a lot of other theories related to business and motivation of employees. So he challenged me to, in the future, look for a better theory, or a more recent theory, or a more applicable theory that has not been challenged so much. And that was good feedback, good advice. And unfortunately, it's difficult because you do have to, well, you just have to be on your P's and Q's as far as venturing into other fields and trying to borrow their theory, which is what we do a lot of in LIS, without having an educational theoretical grounding in that theory. So things can get difficult and dicey. Okay. Finally, my last one here, searching and strategic exploration. Searching for information is often non-linear and iterative, requiring the evaluation of a range of information sources and the mental flexibility to pursue alternate avenues as new understandings develop. So, yeah, this is basically, well, again, I can read the paragraph here. The act of searching often begins with a question that directs the act of finding needed information, encompassing inquiry, discovery, and serendipity. Searching identifies both possible relevant sources as well as the means to access those sources. Experts realize that information searching is a contextualized, complex experience that affects and is affected by the cognitive, affective, and social dimensions of the searcher. And again, this is my concern right here. So when we talk about the cognitive, the affective, and the social dimensions of the searcher, what the cognitive is more so your logical side. And what the affective is more so your emotional side. And so emotions do play a part in information verification, information confirmation, so forth and so on. And I think that's dangerous in these, and don't get me wrong, I will admit that I'm a liberal, I'm left-leaning, but, you know, it's okay if people are conservative, people are Trump supporters and that sort of thing. But what I'm going to say to that is, at the risk of offending, what I'm going to say to that is that I think a lot of people on both sides are looking for information that satisfies their affective or satisfies their emotions. So again, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing if people are just watching MSNBC or just watching Fox News and getting their information that way. I think that we've actually created two different societies doing that, where you and your neighbor are living in totally different realities if you're watching MSNBC and your neighbor's watching Fox. I think that we are doing a disservice to ourselves by allowing this siloed information delivery that satisfies the affective realm. I think we're doing ourselves a disfavor by allowing this to continue. I would love to see BBC, and BBC may have a liberal bias as well, but from my understanding, it's one of the least biased of the information sources when it comes to news. It's certainly not what you're getting with MSNBC or what you're getting with Fox. Okay, so that's kind of how I look at that. We have to be careful as far as people running away with their emotions when looking for or looking at or reviewing information. So now that that is said, one thing that you'll probably want to do is look at the framework sandbox. The sandboxes that ALA does, and ACRL is a division of ALA, by the way, in case you all don't know. So the sandboxes, and ALA has a lot of sandboxes. These are very helpful. I see you have to log in here. I am a member of ALA, but I don't know if not being a member of ACRL will make this. Oh, a user login is not required. Well, okay. That takes me right back there. I'm not going to, in real time, look for, actually, what is this, resources? Okay. Okay, cool. So these are some of the sandboxes that you can get for the different frames. And again, these are really, really useful. And you can, for your papers that you'll be doing later on, you can limit by frame. So if you decide information has value is the one you want, then you can focus on those particular frames. Okay. Last thing I'm going to show you all, and then I'm going to let you all go, is if you have the time, and I have not had the time, but if you have the time, 23 Framework Things is a very self-paced resource that will allow you to, they basically got the framework divided into 23 different modules here. And what you can do is go self-paced through each module, do the readings. You can review these comments. And this is a good, neat way to become more in-depth familiar with the framework. So in order to get here, you can Google 23 Framework Things, but then also your web address is https://23frameworkthings.wordpress.com. Okay? So that is a little rundown on the framework. Again, you do have an assignment that is related to the framework later on in the course, so you may want to familiarize yourself with it. All right, that is my time. I am going to brew some tea. Thank you all for being a wonderful class. Peace.